Feedback and Feedforward with Hannah Atkinson. First, we're going to start off by addressing the elephant in the room with a misconception blaster moment. Take a second to pause the video and check your own preconceived biases about feedback and Feedforward. Now, feedback, generally speaking, is meant to provide students with information about where they are directly in relation to learning outcomes and goals. The focus is usually on where the individual is right now and what has been done wrong or insufficiently. Feedforward, on the other hand, is recommending actionables to individuals and students about how they can work towards achieving their goals. It's a process that's both responsive and reflective and supports a growth mindset and metacognition, and it opens a dialogue between facilitator and student about content and the learning process moving forward. Now, we also need to acknowledge that there are some challenges to educators implementing feedback. Take a moment and pause to consider whether these challenges are something you've faced. Workload and time ratio, lack of student motivation, and more. Now, we know feedback and Feedforward are worth it, and we're going to go through some of that through this video. But remember, we are always asking a few questions in this process. Where are the students? Where do we want to help them get to? And how are we going to get to that point? It's a continuous cycle about growth and learning. And we're going to start with the implementation of feedback. There are lots of different delivery models when you're offering feedback to others, the most common being sandwich, SBI, and idea model. Tacos is one way to make sure that the feedback you are giving is timely, actionable, consistent in both structure and content, knowledge-based, ongoing, and supportive and constructive. If your feedback is all of these things, then your students are going to appreciate it and they're going to be able to go much farther with it. Feedback ties into so very many aspects of your assessments. It is both equitable and authentic, and it can be used in assessment as, of, and for learning. All feedback should be individualized and differentiated, and you can deliver it in a variety of methods. And your feedback can even be tied directly to your rubrics, your learning outcomes, and expectations. When you're creating feedback for your students, you need to ask a lot of questions of yourself and of the work that's being done. Where are the students now? Is there a concept a student is struggling with? Where? How are they struggling with this? And is my feedback specific to their work? Next, we're going to be looking at Feedforward. Feedforward is an essential part of the process of assessment. Students need to know how they're performing in relation to learning goals, and they have to know where it is that they want to go, and so do you. That way, steps and recommendations can be tailored specifically for that student. And don't forget, students should be encouraged to be involved in the process. It supports active learning, experiential learning, and a constructivist approach. Now, feedback is mainly an assessment of the student's learning, what has or hasn't been understood. Feedforward, on the other hand, is mainly assessment for and as learning. We're planning, teaching, and assessing constantly throughout the process of Feedforward. We are observing where our students are at, and we're asking questions constantly. A vital aspect of the learning and Feedforward process is follow-up. It encourages metacognition, accountability, and taking responsibility and ownership of learning, and active participation in the learning process. We have to make sure students understand the feedback and Feedforward they've been given, and if we don't follow up, we can't ensure that. It also helps in determining whether intervention or additional support might be needed. Take a moment to pause this video and read this scenario about Stuart Dent. Now, when we're considering the feedback that Stu has been given, we're going to ask ourselves a lot of questions. And in looking at the feedback, think back to that tacos model. Is this feedback knowledge-based? Is it consistent in structure and content? Are there actionables in it? Is it supportive and constructive? For example, instead of "you brought up a couple of good points and I like this section," maybe try highlighting and adding a comment directly onto the document, saying something like, "This line with the statistics about how holistic development is supported by offering ample time for free play and exploration is well thought out and researched. It really struck with me as I read." And rather than say, "pay attention to details and spelling," try giving recommendations for what they can do to improve moving forward, and talk specifically about what errors you might have seen in their paper. Feedback and feedforward don't have to be a written form. In fact, we give a lot of oral feedback and feedforward throughout the day. Étudiant is a student in your culinary class, and he's been having some issues with following recipes. In this scenario, we're using the idea model to deliver oral feedback to A2. We identify what the incorrect behavior is. We describe the consequences of following that incorrect behavior. We encourage the continuance of the accepted and expected behavior and agree on what to do to change it moving forward. And we follow up on that later on. Now, consider this written example. What might you say to a student that had this in their written report? What could you do to give them feedback and feedforward? At the bottom are some suggestions. You could highlight the grammar, spelling, and punctuation errors and recommend writing supports through your school, grammar apps, or finding peers. And make sure that they know that you are available to give them support. And you can make suggestions on improving their writing. I notice you use the word important repeatedly. Maybe you could try vital, critical, or imperative. Or add research to support what you're saying instead of just saying there are lots of different resources that would approve and support. In conclusion, we're asking lots of questions throughout the feedback and feedforward process. And it is a cycle with continuous learning and development. It is not a linear process. And we're involving students throughout. Now, make sure you're looking at where students are, where they're going, where they want to go, and how we're going to get there together. Thank you.